You may take your seats, but I want you to say in this attitude, please, just take your seats and think for a moment of what God has been saying to you personally. So we're singing those songs. My mind went back to a conference that I was speaking at in New York a number of years ago. Quite a few hundred people in the conference. There were two speakers at it. One was myself and the other was a pastor from China. His name was David Chang. Never forget one of the stories that David Chang shared that day. When he talked about churches that he visited and spoke at in China. He referred to them as the underground churches. Churches that were meeting in secret. Because to be a Christian in some parts of China, even today, leads to imprisonment and death. And he shared how that at one of the churches he was speaking at, he had to arrive at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And the service was starting around 6 o'clock in the evening. And he said throughout the day, people would come along in their ones and their twos. They wouldn't all drive to church and park the cars outside or outside the home where they were gathering. They'd walk to the home. But they'd walk in ones and twos, and they spread it out throughout the day so that they weren't being noticed as a crowd getting into the one place. They didn't want the secret police to pick them out and identify them. And when it came to the time for the service to be started, knowing that everyone who was going to be there were there, they would lock the doors. And then they would put papers or coats, material at the bottom of the door and around windows so that no noise would escape as they were singing. And then he said that when they began to sing, there were no instruments. There was only someone to lead them in worship. And he said they began to sing, but they all whispered their songs. And he did the whisper. Everyone whispered their songs of worship and praise to God. And he said in that moment, he understood where worship was coming from. It was coming from the heart. And he said he felt the presence of God in that place as those people began to whisper their worship and their praise to God. And they were there for a few hours fellowshipping, encouraging one another, studying the Word of God together. And then they left in the darkness. Remember, the pastor of that particular church, he had everyone in the congregation hold a candle. And his plan was at the end of the services that we were running and were speaking at. His plan was to get everyone, to turn all the lights out in the church and get everyone to light a candle. to light up the darkness. But he stood up on the platform at the end and he said, this is what I planned to do. But having listened to these men today, it seems so trivial that we think we're doing something if we light a candle in church. I love what we do in this church. I absolutely do. I love our praise and our worship. I love us coming together in fellowship, encouraging one another. But I'm challenging you this morning, every single one of us, to look at where our worship's coming from. Because the Father's looking at those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. And I pray that before we leave this gathering this morning, before we go back into our cars and head home, that every one of us will know indeed that the Lord has spoken to us and that we've made a proper response to Him.